In this presentation, we will discuss why the government has the right to tax us. We want to address this for a few different reasons. One is that if you do tax preparation, or you may feel this way yourself, you will certainly run into clients that are not happy about the taxes that they have to owe at the end of the year, especially if the tax preparation results in a tax that is due as opposed to a refund. And you'll have some clients that will be very adamant about the idea that the government just should not have the right to set a tax rate and tax us on it. And you'll hear some that will say that it's not constitutional or it's not American to have basically a tax. Note that as a tax preparer, it's not our job typically to argue with a client over something like this. Typically, we want to push forward with the tax preparation, and any kind of argument with the client over something like this is not usually beneficial. So what we want to do is empathize with the client about the tax that is going to be owed, provide the information related to the justification for the taxes for the government, and then just helping to recognize that this is just one of those things that are basically out of our control. We have to do what we have to do and push forward with it. The primary law that allows the federal government to tax is the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. The 16th Amendment to the Constitution passed in 1913, and it says, "The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration." So this is going to be the law that supports the right for the federal government to have the income tax. So you may want to have this in your tax preparation office. Again, not to argue with anybody, just to provide that information. If you do have the argument or the sense that the taxation is not right in some way, that's okay. You can argue that, and I can understand basically that argument. But when you make that argument, you just want to be aware of the facts. So if you were to say something like it's unconstitutional to have taxation, then you'd have to contend with the 16th Amendment in some regard. You'd have to address it, of course, in some regard. One way you might address it is to say, well, yeah, but in 1913, they had no idea that the taxes would be as high, that the amendment would be used to have the amount of taxes without any kind of restrictions that were in place. So you could still say, you could still argue whether or not the tax code is fair or how much tax should be fair and whatnot, but you want to keep in mind the 16th Amendment within that framework of the tax argument. You can also think about the idea of when taxes have gone up throughout the history of the United States. When the country was started, it was started with a deep skepticism towards a centralized government, and therefore the taxes themselves, there was a lot of skepticism about the need for the central government to have taxes. Of course, when do the taxes typically go up? When there's defense, when there's a need to defend, some type of war takes place, and you're going to have some need for an organization of an army, and typically that's going to be one of the major functions of the centralized government. So note that whenever there's going to be some kind of military problem, that's usually when the taxes go up. And a lot of people would say, well, that's justifiable because there's a military crisis right now. Therefore, yeah, I'm okay to give more money at this point in time to pay for the military crisis. But then, of course, the idea would be that once the crisis is over, the taxes should go back down to where it was before the crisis took place. And typically that's not the case. So if you look at the taxes going up, oftentimes you're going to have a crisis, taxes go up, funding goes towards the crisis, typically a military crisis. And then after the crisis is over, the taxes never quite get back down to where they were before, and they keep on going. So you could still make arguments about, the fairness of the tax code. That's all fine. But when you go to the line of saying, taxes themselves are un-American or unconstitutional, then that's going to be a difficult argument to make typically.